ค Okay, gang. 1 second. Good logic. We're trying to get him in here. He's DMing me. I'm telling him to go to the server. I give him the link. Once he gets here, we'll pull him in and we'll start. But yeah, he has all the tools at his disposal. Okay, I have given him the. Oh, there he is. Okay,
Hey!
great. We made it. Everyone's here.
I was afraid Lawgic got swatted again.
Did you get swatted recently?
I think Lawgic was posting about steps he was taking to avoid SWAT attempts.
Ugh. Well, let's.
Hopefully nothing happened.
Yeah. Can you hear us, sir? Hello? If you're talking, we can't hear you. I don't know if you're using the right mic or what.
As someone who messes this up pretty regularly, often the cause is that another app is controlling your video or mic.
Well, I hope everybody had a good St. Patrick's Day today.
Good enough.
I just woke up.
Give me a second.
We're actually prepping for trial, so my life is a little complicated these days.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time.
This is worth doing.
Yep. Give him a second. Let's see. To check if you're using the right mic, if you look on the Discord, there will be a microphone symbol. There will be a little arrow next to that symbol, and you can choose which mic it is. If it's still not, oh, there's visual at least. Now we just need an audible connection. Can you hear us? Nothing? Nothing? Damn. Let's see. User settings, voice video. Give me a second.
Sometimes I've had luck hitting the reset everything button.
Give me a second. I'm just gonna. He can't hear or see us, right? Or he can't hear us at least. So I'm gonna just DM him.
Now
okay.
I hear you.
Okay, yeah, you're really low, but we can hear you. You're like super low. So if you could turn up your mic or your volume.
I think I'm using the wrong. Okay, so first of all, I'm hearing you only through YouTube, like I'm on delay. Second of all, so I'm not hearing you directly through this thing.
I can hear you now. It's kind of low, but I can hear you.
I think that would be in the settings and audio. Then maybe he's got like something different.
Yeah, trust me, I'm usually not low.
Okay, I've turned you up on my end. You're fine now.
I think that's what I gotta figure out here.
Apologies, gang. We'll get through this together. Just give us a minute, and we'll get started.
Makes the dream work.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is if you look at the output device, make sure it's coming into your headphones. Other than that, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, this is a show. We're here. We're live. I know it's quiet. We're trying to get tech issues situated, so Good Logic can actually hear what we have to say, and then we will start.
Better?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine. We're just waiting for you to hear us through Discord.
All right, try now.
Okay, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Hey, look at
Wonderful.
that.
Okay, let's just get right into it then and start the show. We know we don't have all night here, gang. Okay, welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WIC TV. It's a cross-ideological space where we come together and talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Tonight, we have a show for you, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be talking about the case of Mahmoud Khalil. Apologies if I mispronounced this, okay? A little over a week ago now, he was detained, and the Trump administration attempted to deport him for aiding and abetting terrorist activities. Why they're doing it is rather unclear, the exact reasoning. There was a habeas corpus set on this, and he stood trial Wednesday, and they're still going to go through it. They're fighting right now for jurisdiction. Currently, he's in Louisiana. He's trying to get jurisdiction in, I believe, New York. But the question of the day, the question for the show is, do immigrants have First Amendment protections, or should they? To what extent should we allow green card holders, visa holders, etc., the ability to protest, even for things we might find reprehensible? Is the Trump administration breaking the law here, or are they simply following the proper procedures? What's going on? We're going to talk about it. We got some great guests. I'm going to give them short intros to introduce themselves and to introduce their thoughts. We're going to start with Ryan Mullally. Tell people who you are, why we should listen to you, and your thoughts. Go ahead.
Happy to be here as always. My name is Ryan Mullally. I'm a New York City-based litigator, and typically I'm on this show talking about the fundamental constitutional violations that led me not to want to vote for Kamala Harris, or the problems I had with Joe Biden. And today I'm doing the exact same thing, but I'm here to tell you why the Trump administration has this dead wrong. Because the values are the values and the Constitution is the Constitution, and they're doing this incorrectly, which is a shame because there are so many defensible versions of this policy they could have gone for, and that's not the direction they've chosen. So for whatever reason, they're stepping on a giant legal rake, and I suspect it's going to go badly for them. I don't typically do this, but in this instance, I feel compelled to give a short disclaimer. I'm here speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for my firm or my clients. And most importantly, though I have significant past affiliation with Mr. Khalil's lawyers, in that we were co-counsel on a Supreme Court case that we litigated together and won, which was fantastic and one of the great experiences of my life. I have not spoken to them about this case. I do not know their legal reasoning. I do not know their theory. I am not in the inner circle, despite our past affiliation, and have no capacity to speak for Mr. Khalil or his legal team.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. We'll get into it as we go. Next up, first-time guest on my show, Good Lawgic. Tell people who you are, what you think, and kind of like an opening thoughts here. Go ahead.
All right, my name is Joe Neerman. I control the YouTube and Rumble channels called Good Lawgic. I'm a New York litigator turned podcaster shortly after COVID. I basically try following current events, providing a legal perspective as well as a political perspective. And I tend to get a little bit into what I call humanities, but it's really just philosophy of life and how society interacts with each other, both on a macro and a micro scale, and like the underpinnings for how we get there. I feel very humbled to be in the presence of another attorney who is successful in the Supreme Court. That's a lifetime achievement award that you get for that. So I mean that sincerely. What was the topic?
The case is called Tanver v. Townsend. I can't take credit. I was very junior on that team.
Okay.
And actually, Mr. Khalil's counsel did the oral argument, and he's some incredibly gifted attorneys. The question there was whether the U.S. government can use the no-fly list to pressure citizens into informing on their religious community. And if they do, can you hold those officers liable in their personal capacity and sue them for damages? And the answer was yes, you can. So
I'll tell.
That was a
I should
big
throw out
First
one more
Amendment win.
thing. I should throw out one more thing on my resume here, which some people may know me for, and that is I sued Judge Merchan
Mhm.
for his unconstitutional gag order against Donald Trump. I sued both as counsel, and I was the named petitioner as a violation of my rights of freedom of the press, that the wrongful constitutional order in that particular case infringed my ability to hear from him about that particular trial. And I actually went straight to the first department first department, and I argued there. And then I went up to the tried against the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court. Supreme Court took my case, didn't accept my case. They went to they gave it to the panel instead of rejecting it outright. But they decided not to take my case, and that was right around when the election happened. So it sort of became not really relevant anymore.
Hmm.
But so I have fought in my own individual capacity, both as petitioner and client, for First Amendment rights, because my argument was not rooted in the fact that he was a president or was political speech. It was the matter that there's a circuit split as to whether or not a court has a right to gag a criminal defendant, which I think is just a complete abuse of First Amendment rights. I'm a very strong First Amendment advocate. I still think that this case is not a violation of of constitutional law, but I look forward to discussing this with you.
We'll get into it. We'll
And
get into it as we
to
go.
return the favor, the viewers might not know how hard it is to do what he just described, especially without like major firm backing and a huge legal team. So that's quite an achievement.
Cool. We'll get into it. We got a couple more people we got to get in here, got to introduce, and then we'll just kind of open up the floor and we'll get into it. Irrelevant, go ahead. Briefly, please.
Howdy. I am Irrelevant. I am not a lawyer or legal expert in any way, shape, or form. The primary arguments I'm going to be making are moral ones that and where I believe society should be gearing us towards, not as much like citing legal precedent or anything like that. So that's my station.
Yeah, and again, this is both a legal and a moral question, so I appreciate you being here. Last but certainly not least, Libertarian Trap, LT for short. Go ahead.
Hey guys, I'm Libertarian Trap. I have no legal expertise whatsoever, so I'm kind of humbled to be in the presence of two really achieved attorneys. That's absolutely amazing. But I mainly post on Twitter. I cover topics from trans topics to liberty topics, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, well, with that, let's kind of just open it up to the floor. And I guess the question I have first for the panel here is this a free speech issue? Why or why not? What do we think? Go ahead.
Absolutely. It's absolutely a free speech issue. When people say, is it a free speech issue? That doesn't mean that Mr. Khalil is necessarily going to win. It means that when you litigate this, do you have to litigate the First Amendment? And you absolutely do. And this is not, I think, even truly up for debate. Just to give you a little snippet, there's a case called Bridges v. Wixon from 1945. It's an old case, but it's still good law. And I'll read you a direct quote. Freedom of speech and the press is accorded to aliens residing in this country. End quote. It's not exactly up for debate whether or not an alien residing in this country is protected by the First Amendment. The court is completely clear.
I just have a quick question for you. At what line do you draw the difference between speech and a call to action?
Great question. And there are... let me see if I can remember the name of this case, because I'm doing this off the top of my head. And I can never do this right.
Brandenburg v. Ohio?
Oh, that's another one. Yeah, there was a case involving the Communist Party where basically an immigrant was deported, and the Supreme Court did say that membership in the Communist Party was inherently a call to violent action, because the Communist Party was inherently, in their mind at that time, intending to overthrow the United States government through violent means. I don't know if that case would hold up today. And I certainly don't think that there's been a showing that support for Hamas in the way that Mr. Khalil may or may not have voiced it rises to that level, because there's no argument that he's a member of Hamas, merely that he voiced at most support, which is very different than being a member of the Communist Party. But it is a fair point, and there is a line there, because inciting violence, a call to action, as you put it, is not protected speech.
All right.
So for anybody who
Um,
thinks that he crossed the line, can you just give me where you feel like he crossed the line?
Well, I don't think there's evidence that's been presented so far saying that he violated the Brandenburg standard. Certainly, I would concur with that. And I
Yeah.
also I also concur. I'm sorry, what was your first name, counselor?
Ryan,
Ryan or Brian? Is it
Ryan with
B?
an R.
With an R, okay. Yeah. I mean, by Ryan's argument, there's really no point to have a debate if in fact you're going to just label this being a free speech issue. I think that's a poor way of framing this entire issue. I don't think this is a free speech issue. I think that's what the defense would like, to turn this into a free speech issue. But I don't think this boils down to free speech at all. I think this boils down to immigration law, and what are the standards for immigration law. And then you could start to talk about, in that context, what is there a concept of chilling free speech of is the concept of chilling free speech of immigrants something that now forms the basis of a protection from otherwise inscrutable immigration law? Meaning, if he was engaging in conduct that was illegal and they threw him out, right? I think everyone here would agree that that's totally fine, right?
100% we would. And I
And
think the telling fact here is that he has not been charged with any crimes. The government has said he's not going to be charged with crimes.
I don't think
And
he could be charged with crimes. I don't think he could be.
and they specifically picked the foreign policy exception, which is, we can get into. They haven't even actually done that right. So as a matter of statutory law, I don't think they have authority to do this,
Mhm.
because they kind of bungled the paperwork. And that's another topic. But I agree with you that immigration is different and deportation is not a crime. So there's a lesser due process rule. All those things are true. But here, they haven't done any of the things they could do to link him to what would be a slam dunk deportable offense. Like, for example, you can't lie on your immigration forms. I haven't seen his forms, but I'm 100% sure that when you have a student visa, when you apply for lawful permanent resident status, you probably have to check a box or sign a form that says, I do not support a terrorist organization. Like, that would be something I would put on that form. And if he signed that form and then he in fact does support a terrorist organization, that is in and of itself a deportable offense. Because
Well,
but
right.
they haven't alleged that. They haven't tried to prove it.
I don't know why you think that they haven't. Why do you think that hasn't happened? Because I think what happened, Ryan, is I think that when this whole story broke, I think that everyone on his side of this argument, and let's face it, I mean, it's the pro-Palestinians are the ones who are going to be coming out there, are the ones chanting the streets, who are outraged, and the public mobs that we see now is the pro-Palestinian folk who are upset about the prospect of his deportation. I don't know why it is that you assume, and I think they're trying to say you're violating his free speech rights, but I'm not sure why you would assume that he didn't check a box which says I have no affiliation or something to that effect. I would assume because
I think he might have, but when the government was asked why are they pursuing this action, they're not pursuing it for that reason. They're not pursuing it for a crime. They're not pursuing it for a fraud. They're not even attempting to prove those things. So I'm not taking the position here that there's nothing that he ever did or could have done that would warrant a deportation. I'm just saying the government hasn't alleged any of those things, let alone attempted to prove them.
have
And
you looked at
we
their
don't have to give
papers?
them the benefit of the doubt. They actually have to say, this is why we're taking the action. And this is why we're justified in doing it. You don't get to just deport people and say, guess why we're doing it. That's crazy. So I think we have to limit them to just the things that they said justify their action. And the only thing they said justifies their action is that the Secretary of State, Mr. Rubio, has certified that this is a foreign policy problem, that this man represents a contrary interest in the United States foreign policy. But
Right.
the thing is, even there, if you look at the statute, that requires that he provide notice to certain members of Congress. And there's no evidence that happened. So
Is provide
even
notice
if
to what? Who has to provide notice?
if you
Who-
look at, I apologize, we don't have to do
No,
legalese the whole time.
I'm not questioning. I'm not questioning. Your accuracy on the
8
law.
USC
Okay.
1182. It's the foreign policy exception, subpart 3 and 4. It says if a
That code.
determination like the one Rubio made is made with respect to an alien, the Secretary of State must notify on a timely basis the chairman of the committees of the Judiciary and Foreign Affairs, of the House of Representatives, and the committees on the Judiciary and Foreign Relations of the Senate of the identity of the alien and the reasons for the determination. And there is no evidence that this has happened. So even if they're relying on the Immigration and Naturalization Act, which is what the White House said they're relying on to deport this man, they haven't done the paperwork
They haven't done
required.
proper
I want to give
procedure.
Ryan I'm sorry. I want to give Joe here a chance to respond, and then I want to get. I know that LT wants in and Irrelevant wants in. So
Yeah, we
respond.
don't need to
Yeah.
do statutes the whole time.
No, that's fine. I wasn't even asking for the statute. I was just wondering who had to report. And then you clarify it was
Yeah.
Rubio. I'll tell you this. I agree with the notion, first and foremost, that the Supreme Court has afforded protections of civil rights to people who are visiting this country, whether it's under visa or green card. Philosophically, I do want to get off my chest that I think that was such a backward perspective about the Supreme Court. I think it's philosophically and fundamentally flawed to believe that.
Can you
someone
elaborate
who's-
on that? Why? Why you think
why I
that's flawed?
think it's
No.
flawed?
Mhm.
Because the reason why you have to think through why we have civil rights. And a lot of people love thinking that, well, it's because these are natural and ordained laws that belong to all of us, and accordingly, that's why we have these laws. That's where everyone starts at. But you sort of have to look through it a little bit further. That when we were first establishing our government in 1789, we're trying to figure out, how do we put people in charge of us who are going to be able to take care of the steps that we need them to get done and make sure they don't become tyrannical and end up destroying the citizenry themselves? So what are we looking for them to have done? We want them to help, create an army and make sure things are running efficiently and safely and protect our own safety. But at the same time, we still have that gnawing fear that they're going to become tyrannical and start treating us like we're scum and throwing us in prison, or space habeas corpus, all sorts of different ways that they can violate our rights, take away our guns, they can cruel and unusual punishment, all these different concerns, or freedom of speech, all these different concerns that we had, that our government would abuse the very people who elected them. And that's the point, that it's a government by the people, of the people, and for the people being the citizens who are putting them in power. That being the case, it seems self-defeating to think that the framers of our Constitution had in mind that we're going to put people who are in place to protect the citizens, and then because of civil rights, restrict them from being able to do that with people who are not citizens. And that's why I think it's philosophically flawed to think that the framers ever intended for a second that some French person who would step on our soil would be entitled to the same civil rights protections as an American citizen. I think it doesn't make any sense at all. So while I that doesn't mean, what I'm saying is my personal perspective. At the
Certainly.
same time, I'm sufficiently savvy and experienced to understand that the Supreme Court does not agree with me on that perspective.
Yep.
And that's not what the law. The
And-
law is not what my perspective is, and I have to recognize what the law is, and then ask whether or not people are complying with the law. But that is my personal perspective.
But as I did say earlier, that this is both a legal question and a moral question, and that's an interesting philosophical kind of way to explore this. But I want to give the mic to Irrelevant, and then to LT for a minute, just so they can chime in and maybe have a say as well. Go ahead.
Okay, so it sounded like we were kind of just at least the two who were talking in agreement before, of the perspective that he was inside of a terrorist group. Do you guys believe that the CUAD is a terrorist group?
I'm not sure when you say the CUAD, what does that mean?
Sorry, that's what group was he a part of?
University
Or
of
what is
Apartheid, I guess.
establishing his link to terrorism?
I think the terrorist group at issue here is Hamas, which has been a designated terrorist.
Yeah, how is
organization.
he linked to Hamas?
Yeah, I think that's an important point, because in the government's own statements, they said they didn't say he's a member. They didn't say he supported them. They didn't say was affiliated with them. They said he took actions that aligns with the goals of Hamas, which is a huge tell because think about the degrees of separation there. Like if you were a member of Hamas, we would just say you're a member. If we're going to say you're taking orders on the sly, but you're not an official order, we call you affiliated. They're not saying that. They're just saying he said things that Hamas would agree with, which is
that's not what they said.
The degrees of separation there are pretty wild from my perspective. And just to make it really clear, I'm a very pro-Israel, anti-Hamas guy. Like this is not an area where I have a lack of moral clarity. So it's no love for the organization that's making me say this. It's merely the fact that I think they showed their cards. If they could have said he was affiliated or a member, they would have, because those are magic words in the case law. If he's a member of Hamas, just like the case I talked about, member of a communist party, this becomes a very easy deportation. They didn't say it because they can't prove it.
So let me ask you. I'll ask all three of you this question. Let's assume he had not yet obtained a green card or a visa. He was looking to come into this country. Do you think the United States would be at liberty to keep him out on the basis of the actions that we've seen?
He hasn't been in the country, but he participated in
No, I'm not saying that
protests in the country.
Let's say he had done them in Oxford University instead of in Columbia. All the actions that we saw him do, he had done in Oxford.
Now and then he applied for a green card.
Now he applied for a green card and to come in here. Do you think that the United States would be at liberty to say, no, we look at you as an agitator. We don't want you here.
I really say all depends on when you apply. With Biden, probably you'll be let in. With Trump, no.
No, should he is a question.
Should they be allowed to say no to him when he wants to come in here?
Yes, they should be allowed, yes.
Do you agree with that, Irrelevant?
I haven't seen any actions that would constitute that I would say that he can't be allowed in the country.
So you're saying that he would have an affirmative right to come in. That would be an illegal basis for them to reject his application for immigration.
I just don't think he should be rejected. What specifically has he done that would merit rejection?
Well, if he's agitating people what
has he done to agitate people?
Oh, I don't know. He's sitting there screaming that from what I saw, I believe that he was like basically screaming that we need to have more October 7s.
Where did you see that?
There was video that's been going all over X. That's where I had seen that. Some people question whether
I would love to see that because I tried looking into this very diligently, and based on what I've seen, the worst thing that this dude did was be associated with CUAD and in specific lectures recorded on a Nokia phone, said some things that could be interpreted as a little bit too pro-resistance. For the pro-Palestinian resistance, I've not seen him say hey, we need more October 7th.
I would say that associated is a little bit generous considering he was one of the lead negotiators during the encampments.
To my knowledge, he was not present during the encampments. He gave speeches that in between encampments and then would leave. He wasn't present for 99% of the encampments.
Negotiation is different than present. He was a lead negotiator.
I understand he was a negotiator. I don't doubt that he was in a leadership role in the CUAD. What I'm saying is that the CUAD principally was a pro-Palestinian protest that had moments in which it devolved into violence, it devolved into anti-Semitism, and I agree that those things happened, but I don't think that the CUAD as a group is a terrorist group. I mean, also the United States doesn't designate it a terrorist group. So his affiliation with that group shouldn't be principled as to whether or not he gets kicked out.
I believe it was around March. Sorry,
go ahead.
It was around March 2024 where the CUAD organized an event called Palestine 101, which had the speaker by the name of Khalid Barakat, who is a senior member of the PFLP, a designated terrorist group. The PFLP is the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. So there is some terroristic connections there.
Because it has hold on. So I'm curious. Would you say that college campuses shouldn't have these people with these affiliations on their campuses to be able to give speeches?
Do I believe terrorists shouldn't be platformed on college campuses? Is that what you're asking me?
Sure, yeah.
No.
You
No,
don't think
not
so?
not
Okay. I personally, I think that what I as a I think college campuses, if anything, should be one of the most protected places for free speech that exists in the United States of America. I think you go to college for the explicit purpose of hearing challenging ideas. I think even racist ideas, explicitly racist ideas, should be allowed on college campuses. I think it's weird that we're preventing Ben Shapiro, all these other people from coming on college campuses because we're so afraid that they're going to be doing really weird or indoctrinate the college people. I think that people that we very much disagree with, as long as their speech is not explicitly calling to action or doing any of these things.
But Lawgic makes an important point here, which is it's a distinction that I think does matter, which is the amount of free speech rights you have does vary based off your relationship with the country. Like if you are a foreigner living in a foreign land, your free and you're there right there, your free speech rights regarding America are minimal. If you're when you get a student visa and you enter, they increase. When you get long-term resident status, they increase. As a citizen, they're at their zenith. So the way you phrase the point you were making there, I think is just slightly off, because when we talk about Ben Shapiro on a college campus, that's very different than asking the question, should we let in someone to the country to speak at campuses with a terrorist affiliation? Because someone that you're choosing to let in doesn't have the same protections as someone that's already here. And Lawgic is right about that. That said, he was already here. So it's a distinction in the abstract.
That was my first question to lead up to my second question. Because my second question is, if I wanted to see if we were all on the same page. I was surprised to see that Irrelevant was not on the same page, but at least I think the other two of you are on the same page with respect to the fact that America should have a legal right to keep out someone who they deem a potential agitator. And I do think there's a difference between someone whose speech might inspire novel thoughts or even reprehensible thoughts versus an agitator, because an agitator is basically designed not to just get you thinking about something, but looking to get you to engage in action, not necessarily then and there in violation of the Brandenburg Standard, but the idea is to basically make you feel like you're a piece of crap if you don't go home and then or go out and start agitating to actually engage in potentially violent activity. And that's a difference. That's a massive difference between Ben Shapiro, who might get people to start thinking about things in a different way, and someone whose objective is not just to get you to think, but to get you to act. And that's why I would classify that as an agitator.
Can you provide any evidence that this dude was trying to get people to act in any kind of terroristic fashion?
I'll tell you this much. I'll tell you, you know what? I'll give you, sure, I can. If we accept him as being a leader of the Columbia stuff, to the extent that they're engaging in harassing students and chasing them into a library, or destroying buildings or taking buildings hostage, that is illegal activity. So I can't tell you that he said this thing.
So hold on, because he was a
I'm
leader.
just gonna finish my thought, and then you can respond.
Yeah.
So I cannot tell you definitively. He said X, and then they responded like this. But I'll tell you that he certainly is a leader of an agency which is looking to encourage their students to act in ways that are illegal. But I would not go so far as to say
where is the connection between CUAD explicitly telling students to do these things? To harass people on the basis of their Jewishness, or to explicitly participate.
Where did Mr. Khalil denounce anything that happened during that whole protest?
I don't know. I haven't checked his personal Twitter. Have you? Where did he support these ideas?
You're the one sitting here saying that he's done nothing.
To be clear, I know the ideas that he supported were the principal purposes of the CUAD, which is Palestinian resistance. Just to be clear, I am personally not a fan of the manner in which the CUAD goes about their protests. I'm not a fan of even the principal purpose the CUAD claims to be there for. I think that the speech that they have frequently on pro-Palestinian stuff is really just out of pocket. It doesn't meet merit, in my opinion. However, I do not see anything from the CUAD as a whole that would say that your affiliation with that group should warrant deportation.
And
Just to make
go
this
ahead.
totally clear, the whole thing is a little bit of a red herring. Because look, there's stuff that happened at Columbia that was a crime. There was violence. Halls were held up. Students couldn't go to class. Crimes were committed. And if the US government wants to charge him with one of those crimes and he is convicted, many of them are deportable. And it's not a free speech issue at that point. It's not a due process issue at that point. That's a totally fair basis to deport someone, but you have to prove it in court and you have to bring the charges. And the government has not done that and has said they will not do that. So whether or not he was participating in something that could be, in our imaginations, considered a crime is irrelevant because the government's not charging him with a crime. It's a total red herring. And look, this is what I said at the beginning. It drives me crazy about the Trump administration sometimes. They have a good idea. They have a policy that if you ask me from a mile high, do I agree with this? I'd say, yeah, you know what? I would like to crack down on the Columbia type protest. That really did bother me. I would like to do something. And then they go about it in a way that is just norm and constitution shattering. And you can't support it. There's so many ways they could have gone about this where I wouldn't be on the show arguing this side. If they were charging him with a crime, I'd be on here saying, hey, you know what? Let's see what the jury says. If he's convicted, deport him. Fine. That 100%, that would be my position. But that's not what they're doing. So I don't think they don't get a hall pass for that.
Right, but I'll ask you, Ryan. I'll ask you, Ryan. Okay, so, and this is something that I was debating Pisco about a week ago or so, and that is
I love that pronunciation of his name so much. I'm gonna do that forever. Pisco. That's locked in. Okay.
Okay.
Was that wrong? I wasn't trying to be offensive.
No. I think it's Pisco, but Pisco is funnier, so we'll allow it. Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, so I was making this point to him, which is, we sort of have to sit down with someone who's naturalized and say, now that you've been naturalized, when you get naturalized, you swear an oath of fidelity to the United States.
Mhm.
That you're gonna be supporting the United States. You're not gonna be breaking, basically abiding by our Constitution. And I said, when someone makes that oath, you sort of have to let it die the moment that they get admitted, because and just say they have the same rights as anyone else who's born and living here for 15 generations. They're exactly the same level of citizenry, because at a certain point you sort of have to say, okay, this is an American. And Ilhan Omar, while I find her to be a repugnant and detestable individual, I recognize that her civil rights are 100% as rock solid as mine. That being said, when someone is undergoing this process of going from being someone who's not a citizen to coming to our country and ultimately becoming a citizen, so along the way there, I think we sort of have to ask ourselves, and I think it's a fair question to ask from the immigration perspective of, are they upholding the exact same standards that it took them to get in here while they are here? Meaning that if he's someone who could be rejected on the basis of activity X, he could be properly rejected from admission into this country. I think it's fair to say that while you're in this country, in this quasi-status zone of being someone who's not a citizen but has permission to visit here, if you want to retain the fruits of that privilege, you have to live up to the no less than the same standards that you needed to get into this country. And to me, that's why this is an immigration question. It's not at all a free speech question. It's a question of, can the president and those who and his executive agency, which is overseeing INS and immigration statuses, that do they have the right to say, look, this activity you're doing while here in our country is something that we know, if you had been engaging in this while in Oxford University, we would have a legal right to get rid of you, to reject your application. Similarly, just because you're here as with a visa or a green card, that does not empower you now to retain an unfettered right to stay here as an immigrant. I think that's really what this whole question boils down to. Do you disagree with me that
responses?
that's the essence of this question?
I mean, the essence of the question isn't you keep divorcing it from a free speech issue. The issue is how much speech we believe ought to be given and or currently are legally given to green card holders.
Well, you're looking to give the same level of speech to someone who's living in Thailand and never
I'm
visited here
not.
before. No, you said that if he wants to apply, he should be allowed to apply, and that's not a legitimate basis to keep him
Anybody
out.
should be allowed to apply. I never said
No,
that
but
we
that
can't
application
reject anybody for what they say. What I said
precisely.
is that in this particular case, I've not seen anything from this individual that would indicate that they shouldn't be let into the country from their specific speech.
Right.
I think
And you're unique in that perspective.
Okay, you can say that. Compel me. What has he said that should warrant immediate removal from the United States?
I think you're too fixated on this individual rather than conceptually the
We're
idea
talking
of
about the deportation of this individual. Of course,
right. And
yeah.
we're talking about in the context of whether or not the country should be allowed to remove individuals like this.
Yes.
So,
So what
I might
has
agree
the-
with Ryan. And I'll let you finish in a second, Irrelevant. But what I'm saying is I might agree with Ryan that procedurally, the way the Trump administration handled this particular case, perhaps they failed. I don't know. I haven't looked at the procedure that they engaged in or haven't engaged in. I don't think we've had much access to it. So it's a difficult thing to discuss. That's why I don't want to fixate on him individually. It's much more interesting to say, is this something they're allowed to do or not allowed to do? Because
shouldn't
there's
we
too little
use
knowledge
the
known.
specific case that we came here to talk about, a specific person that we came here to talk about, to establish a general rule for how we feel like it should be conducted then?
Okay,
if we
great.
don't
What
have
evidence
the
does the United
access to
States
the
have?
proceedings?
What evidence does the United States have?
I don't know. That's why
Yeah,
I'm not
neither
here
do
to
I.
discuss.
Neither do I. That's why
Right.
there's no
So
point
we
to talk
should
about him
talk. So we
individually.
should talk about what the person has done and whether or not we consider it to be justified on the grounds of either what we have or what we can visibly see from this human being. That's what we should do.
I think, Logic, I would be more receptive to the argument you made if the government was relying on one of the many provisions that allow them to deport somebody for predictable conduct. So, like, for example, like there's stuff in the law that says if you commit a crime, if you do fraud on your immigration forms, if you're a member of a terrorist organization, those are all deportable, right? So, because those are all deportable, an immigrant can look at who knows the law, is informed, can modify their behavior and avoid a bad outcome. In this case, the way they're trying to deport him is just the Secretary of State names you and then you're gone. So there's not like from his perspective, there's no predictability to the law in that. It's literally ad hoc. And the reason it's so offensive to me in terms of like the rule of law is that A, as I said earlier, there's no evidence that the government even followed the required procedure. But B, as we've talked about, it's there's a difference between, for example, a student visa holder and a green card holder when it comes to how much due process right you have, how much free speech right you have. It's a different category, right? And when ICE came, they said, "We're deporting you and we're revoking your student visa." And then he got them to call his lawyer, and his lawyer told them, "Hey, it turns out he's not on a student visa. He's a lawful permanent resident." And they said, "Oh yeah, we're revoking that too." They didn't know what
Right.
status he had because they didn't care. They hadn't done some legal analysis to figure out what their evidence was. They were just deporting him because Trump and Rubio said so. And that's just not a good enough reason. So yeah, while I think it is worth having a conversation about how we handle dissidents from immigrants and what level of free speech they should have in the abstract, the level of self-goal that the Trump administration has had in the way that they went after Mr. Khalil is beyond the pale. And so to me, I can't move past that because they can't be allowed to deport someone with this little regard for the law. They
I
have to
will.
cross the T's, dot the I's, give him his day in court. You can't just do it by fiat. That's crazy.
I
Go
will
ahead, LT.
say the part that I think you're talking about is what 18 USC 1227 Part B, where I
It's a
kind of read it as
long
the.
statute. Yeah, it's mostly 1182, but there's a bunch. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh,
I
okay.
think that's
I was more or less
eight
referring to
USC.
the
Eight
Rubio
USC,
part
right?
where he could just say you need to go, like that kind of thing. Where it read to me was more like reasonable grounds, but Yeah, 1182, I was looking at more like material support and stuff like that, with like the creation of like the pro-Hamas iconography, with the language in the pamphlets, the production and distribution, stuff like that. Like, I was kind of curious of your view on that and how that would relate to 1182.
Again, I mean, I'm just at the risk of being a broken record.
Mm,
They could have cited those provisions
yeah.
and said he provided material support to Hamas, at which point I would be very interested if the government could prove it. But they didn't, and they haven't. So it's not really up to me to make their case for them. I agree that would be a better basis.
I'll tell you right now.
Typically, if you sorry, just to give me if I finish the thought, in my reading of the case law, in order to prove affiliation, it can't just be I said something that supports Hamas. There has to be some kind of reciprocity, like you have a relationship with the organization.
Like if they paid
Or-
him to support Hamas
Yeah.
or to pass
Or
out the pamphlets or something. Yeah, okay.
or if Hamas did him a lot of favors when his family was still in Syria. And that's how he got enough money to get to the United States. And now in the United States, he's doing things on behalf of Hamas, right? Like, if you could prove some kind of back and forth where they had mutual support, that's the kind of thing where you could deport somebody. And I'm sure it would be litigated under the First Amendment, but it would be a clear loser. Like you would lose and you'd get deported because you're not allowed to support terrorist organizations. And I think that's also very clear. I just, if they had evidence of that, they should charge it.
Okay, I want to let Good Logic had a thought that he wanted to get into, and then I have maybe a question for Good Logic to kind of maybe respond to as well. But go ahead, Good Logic.
Thank you. I'll tell you right now, if in fact the government failed to follow proper procedure, then I agree with you. He should not be deported. He should be put back. He should put back in, and they should follow proper procedure, and then remove him. I'm not saying we should do away with due process. I think that we should. I think they should follow proper procedure, and that the government is. We must hold the government, whether we're in favor of this particular administration or against it. We should always be holding the government towards its duty to uphold due process. And I am wholly concurring with you, Ryan, that if in fact your assumptions are correct, are proven correct, that they failed to follow due process, then he should be brought back in. And I feel confident that the court will say you failed to follow proper procedure in A, B, C, and accordingly, we're rejecting you. He has to be put back in. And then I would assume a week later they would go through proper procedure and then have him removed. But the question then comes. So the procedure issue. That's why to me the procedure issue is kind of it's a boring conversation because that's a question of fact. Did they go through proper procedure? Did they not? And I'm on the same page as you that they have to follow proper procedure. If they didn't follow proper procedure, in that case, yeah, he should definitely be brought back in here. That brings us back to the more specific issue as to Mahmoud Khalil's actions and whether or not that is something that gives rise to removing someone through proper procedure, and whether our procedures should allow for having an individual like him be removed, or whether it's just a gatekeeper to keep them from being able to get any sort of access to our country whatsoever. And that's why I think talking about Mahmoud Khalil individually is kind of a waste of time, because there's so little known. I'm wrapping up on this. There's so little known about what the government has on him that it's only once they present that we're actually going to know the basis for his specific removal. And that's why I think that the far more interesting question, at least to me, is should the government be allowed to remove someone who's an agitator in general? If we can establish that he's an agitator, should they have that power and that right to remove someone who's an agitator? Or is that an improper suppression of free speech, given the fact that the Supreme Court, rightly or wrongly, has afforded visitors to this country civil rights protection? That's why I went that way.
Okay.
I don't want to dwell on it, but just make sure I understand you correctly. It sounds like you agree that based on the facts that we know today, this deportation is unlawful.
No.
The government might give us new facts later, but with the facts we have now,
I'm saying I don't know enough about naturalization procedure to make a stand on that, and I don't like weighing in on the law if it's an area of law that's not my expertise. Okay. I'm a commercial litigator by practice.
I've given a lot of reasons why it is unlawful, Is there any facts or law
well,
that you'd like to tell me about why it would be lawful?
because I'll tell you, yeah, the facts I have are that that most of the facts you were, and if I'm wrong, correct me, please, by all means. If I'm wrong on a fact, I want you to correct me. But I understood you be saying that it's what we've seen so far and what you've heard from the government rather than what they've been presenting in court. And those are two different things, because whether what Carolyn Leavitt, whatever her name is, says, even what Rubio says is irrelevant in a statement to someone, is irrelevant compared to the actual papers that are being submitted. I think you would agree with me on that, right? I mean, the actual papers that were in the process. That's what the due process is. Due process is what steps were taken, and that has to be reflected in the court papers.
I would agree with you that if the government does something different, I would reevaluate my stance. But when I looked at the docket, there is no evidence so far
Okay.
of
So
any other
maybe
charges.
maybe
There's
you
no
guys
evidence so
can
far
correct
from
me
the
if I'm wrong, because this is how I understood it, and perhaps I'm wrong here. But there wasn't even going to be a trial. Khalil's lawyer had to basically get someone to make a trial
That's correct.
happen. So the government wasn't going to present any evidence.
There's still no guarantee there's going to be a trial. That's what they're litigating.
Yes, so we don't.
He was held. His lawyers filed what's called a habeas corpus petition to get, basically, which is what the founders put in the Constitution to say, if you're being held without process, without rights, fix it. This is a mass violation. So yeah, that's where we are right now. And I mean, I would be happy to reevaluate my position if the government showed any evidence of a crime, of a proper procedure, but they just haven't.
Would we be comfortable? And this is mostly to Good Logic and to LT here. You have someone who's not yet been granted a visa, not yet in the country. They're at Oxford University or what have you, and they are an agitator, as you say, for, I don't know. They're a MAGA person. They're one of those foreign MAGA guys. Okay, and Biden administration said, we're not going to approve your visa. We're going to specifically deny your visa because we don't like that you support Trump. Would you be comfortable with the government having that power to do so, or using that as the reason that they deny someone a visa?
That's such a phenomenal question. You can make that question even more powerful by basically saying, what if they said, we don't like you because you're Jewish or you're a Muslim? And they said, we don't like this about your position. Would that be a legitimate basis to keep someone out? And I think we all in our gut, we intuitively believe that that's just sick and disgusting, and that should never happen with respect to a religious perspective. And with respect to a political perspective, there tends to be less protection there. And I'll tell you that's one of the reasons I draw a line between an agitator and someone having a political opinion. And I think an agitator is different than someone who just expresses.
Can you elaborate that difference? What's the difference between
an agitator an agitator? The way I'm using that term, at least, is someone who's looking to inspire people to engage in illegal activity. Not necessarily in that moment saying, "Hey, let's go." So it's not a violation of the Brandenburg Standard, because under the Brandenburg Standard, it's only considered illegal speech if you incite someone to engage in activity that is proximal, meaning it's close by in both time and place. So it has to be like, go get that guy. That would be incitement. That's clearly illegal even for American citizens to do.
But do you think that a protester at Oxford University, say, who was basically engaged in a pro-Palestine resistance protest, and organizing it and trying to get other people to join the protest, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think that that's a legal activity that we 100%. Should deny him on?
Oh, I didn't say it's illegal. No, it's not. I would not call that illegal activity. I think that what I'm saying is certainly not by American standards. In UK,
because when you did say your agitator thing, you said the way you were using it is someone agitating for people to engage in illegal activity.
Yeah. No. Okay. So let me clarify.
Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's if someone is an American citizen and they engage in that is something that our Supreme Court has properly said is okay, because we need to have free speech. As Irrelevant pointed out, free speech is how we expand our ideas. It's how we grow. It's how we learn. And it's only when it's something that's controversial, that's being expressed, that we tend to learn anything at all. I mean, some people just will tune out when they hear that because we became so partisan. But I agree with that wholeheartedly, that we should be encouraging differences of opinion. And if he was coming in here and giving speech after speech about how terrible Israel is and how it's an awful and how it's an awful place, and they call it concentration camp and genocide and all these other terms that they love hurling at Israel. If he was giving those speeches, that I don't think is something that should be removable.
Okay, so on Oxford, if you had a guy giving all those speeches, very anti-Israel, pro-Palestine, etc., you'd be okay with granting him a visa. You don't think he should?
I don't think he's doing anything. I don't think he's doing anything wrong.
Okay.
He's just he's inspiring people to have conversations. That's very different. That's very different than would you agree with me that Maxine Waters saying get in their face? If you see someone who's wearing a MAGA hat, you get in their face. Now there's no one around wearing a MAGA hat, but that's agitating. And I think with it, to give an example here, there, you could start to get a flavor for like, okay, this is agitating because I'm basically, she's inspiring people to go get in someone's face when they see him in a restaurant. They're not going to do it right now. It's not a violation of Brandenburg. It's considered completely legal.
Well, I don't think it's illegal to get in someone's face at a restaurant.
Right, I understand that, but that she's saying go get in their face and start
Sure.
screaming at them that you think you're a terrible person. To me,
Yeah,
that's
gross to do, by the way, but I don't think it's illegal.
To my mind, and I think a lot of people would recognize, you're trying to build up scenarios where there's going to be illegal activity in the form of violence. That's what you're doing there.
Build up scenarios where there will be. I mean, it's not illegal. You could.
I 100% said it's legal. I started by saying it's legal.
Okay, so then I would argue then it should be. It's not like we shouldn't be looking at this as a basis.
Okay, so and that's because you're saying that we should basically confer on 8 billion people the same civil rights standards that we ourselves enjoy. That's essentially what you're saying.
I'm not saying that the people everybody who comes into the country should have the same First Amendment rights as the people who are native, natural citizens. I'm not making that argument. What I'm making the argument of is that the specific protections for the specific person that we are referring to in the specific conversation, I have not seen them do anything that meets the merit of deportation.
Are you his boyfriend? Do you know everything he's done? I don't understand.
No, but I decided to consensually come on to a podcast where we are discussing this specific human being.
Okay, so fine. I understand we're discussing.
You're
saying you haven't seen. You're saying you haven't seen. You also have you seen the government's case?
No, but I mean, did you not just agree? Did you not just agree with the idea that this guy wasn't even going to go to trial? His lawyers had to push for a trial.
That's true.
Okay, so wait, stop. Excuse me. When you're like, have you seen the government's case? The government was going to show anybody a case. They were just going to kick him out. What do you mean? Right. He had to literally petition for his right to a trial for the evidence to be presented. So you can't go, oh, this is a boring conversation about what factually the government has on him. It's not a boring conversation. It's a very important conversation because it's about whether or not they can kick somebody out and not even say why and just say, oh, well, we don't agree. He's obviously a national security threat. Get him out.
That's been going on for 230
this is why
years.
The procedural point, we call it procedural, but it matters a huge deal, right? Because let's say Rubio had to actually give a public document that said these are the immigrants and these are the reasons, and then this is why we're going to deport them. Now the whole public's going to zoom in on it. Everyone's going to be talking about it. All the pro bono lawyers are circling. Habeas petitions are flying, and there'll be process, right? And from a First Amendment perspective, that's an important protection, because when if you ask you something, can the government infringe on speech, even protected speech? The answer is yes, but it has to be for a compelling reason. It has to be narrowly tailored, and this isn't narrow. You doing it secretly without following procedure and without publicly saying what you're doing isn't narrow. It's free reign to do it to whoever you want.
This does bring up a larger conversation and this happened after I booked this. The deportation recently of the alleged gang members and MS-13 members by Trump. Trump, at least his administration, is claiming that he's using the War Powers Act, the 1798. I forget the exact thing.
The Alien Enemies Act.
Yeah, Alien Enemies. Thank you. What are our thoughts here on this? Do we think that that's a legitimate and valid thing that the government is doing right now? Are they overstepping their bounds? I know this is a little bit outside the Mahmoud case, but I do feel that these are connected, right? That
Very
there's
connected.
similar
Very
processes at
connected.
places. So
Yeah.
I would like to hear everyone's thoughts on that, if you would. Go ahead. Whoever wants to go, I guess.
I mean, I don't personally know the precedent historically. The only things that I know is that when this act has been deployed in the past, it's been in wartime during war. And so I have no idea if legally it is allowed to be conducted outside of a formal declaration of war. There is a formal declaration of war ongoing with the United States. Outside of that, I'm not sure if it can be deployed. I don't know. I've heard reputable people say that it only can be legally deployed during wartime. I don't know how that specifically works. Obviously, the two people with legal experience are going to have more understanding of whether or not that's a good argument or not. But yeah, something like that. And if it isn't, if there is like no grounds for it to be deployed outside of wartime, I would say this is a similar unilateral approach that we've seen so ubiquitously from Trump.
Okay.
So this
So
is where I'm going to show that this is not a partisan issue for me. The Alien Enemies Act is a law that should not be on the books. Congress should have gotten rid of this a while ago. I agree with you. It has only historically been used in acts of war, in times of war, but it does not limit itself to acts of war in the text. It says if there's an invasion or predatory incursion that's perpetrated, attempted, or threatened against the territory of the United States by any foreign nation or government. And the clever thing, and this is a much more clever team of the Trump side that they did, is they didn't say this is because of the gang. They said in their statement, they wrote, the gangs are part of the Maduro government. And the Maduro government is infiltrating the US to weaken us. Now, that might be pretextual bullshit, but the legal team that put that together at least thought, what does the law say? How do we execute it? And how do we create a cohesive argument? So I actually think that's a lot closer to being legal. Like, I think that, if they stood up in court and they argued the Alien Enemies Act allows them to do that, I think they're a lot closer to winning than they are with Mr. Khalil. So, especially kudos to them, though disobeying a court order is not a good look. Though, again, they were really slick there. I don't know if you guys were following that, but the
I
judge
think I heard that
ordered.
the plane was in the air before the judge made the verbal order. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because the judge enjoined them from deporting. But they had already left. So then their argument is, we didn't disobey a court order. You ordered us not to deport, but we had already done so. So, technically speaking, we didn't disobey anything.
it's such audacity.
Which is, again, like, I'm not saying, I don't know whether no one knows whether this is lawful. This hasn't been litigated in forever. No one knows.
And that's a great point about the law in general, Ryan, which is that when we're talking about an area of law that's never been decided, even at a circuit level, much less the Supreme Court, all you have is lawyers guessing as to like what the law should be or how the law should be interpreted. You have the DOJ guessing, you have the defense counsel guessing, and they're all trying to argue as to what the law should be or how a statute should be interpreted. But I will say, as I think Ryan correctly pointed out, the failure of the statute to reference a need for a declaration of war makes me question why anyone would even present an argument that that's a condition precedent. How do you just all of a sudden read in a condition precedent that there has to be during wartime or after Congress has declared war, that's the only time that this statute would apply? If that was what that's what the drafters of that statute intended, they would have written that. They clearly did not intend that. People want to read it in because that's how it's been used. Just because that's how it's been used doesn't mean that the statute says what they're hoping and wishing it would say.
Well, this is way off topic, but when I get on here and I'm talking about the need to cut regulations, the need to trim down laws, the need to slim down the federal government, this is the shit I'm talking about. You have a law from 1,000,000 years ago or a reg from 1,000,000 years ago that no one uses and no one understands. And then suddenly the government can just dig it out and do some crazy stuff that you've never thought possible before, which is why we just need a lot less of these residual laws that allow the government to do unprecedented things.
I'm going to rein this back in just a
Okay, you
just
can
a
rein me in,
smidge.
but I'll give my
smidge, right?
small government speech.
I know we're going a little off kilter, and it's partially my fault for bringing up the connected thing, but I do think it's interesting to kind of expand the conversation. To my chat gang, if you're liking this content so far, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I know a lot of you want me to drag Pisco on, but it's closed panel for now. Maybe later, if we get boring. Okay. But for now, we're gonna keep it to what we got. If you can super chat though, if you want to read stuff out, $10 from Deej Nuts to say lawyer gang. Well, thank you for that. Okay. Now back to the case at hand. Should legal immigrants in this country, what should they do if they don't want to face the censure or possible deportation like Khalil is facing? Is there anything that that they should watch out for, that they should start to do or not do? What are our thoughts here? Go ahead.
Not lead a violent mob to take over buildings on a college campus. I mean, that might be a great start. I don't know. Call me crazy. Call me crazy. I don't know.
Can you show me where he led the violent mobs?
Was he not a leader of the CUAD?
Yes, he was a leader. Did he lead the
Yes.
violent mobs, though?
Okay, you got us.
Well, does that
Wait,
not
I'm
matter?
sorry. Hold on. Was January 6th violent? Yes or no?
It had violent elements, yes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And
Was Trump not a leader of the January 6th riot or protests?
No.
Trump was not a leader of the January 6th protests.
Not
Bro,
on the Capitol.
Come on, bro.
No.
Come on,
Did he once say go into the building? To the people
I
who
never
went
said,
into the building.
excuse me. I never said, did he say go into the building? What I said is he a leader of the January 6th protests?
Did he not expressly say peacefully and patriotically march down there?
The dude, Mahmoud Khalil, has said several times on record, peaceful protest.
Oh, has he?
Yes.
That's certainly helpful. That's certainly helpful for his cause.
I would actually like to see that.
Yeah, where's that? Where's that video?
Okay. I'll find a video of him saying he believes in peaceful protest for you.
All right, beautiful.
Yeah, and I have not seen any evidence that he was involved in like storming the buildings or like detaining people or the violence that happened. If he was, and I have no reason to think he was, but if he was, that's clearly deportable behavior, and that's the kind of thing you shouldn't be doing.
I would agree with that.
For me, I think, as a green card holder, he would think to himself, I'm in America. I have freedom of speech as a lawful permanent resident. I should be able to voice my issues I should be able to voice my opinion on political issues. So I don't think that he would have modified his behavior in terms of just speech to avoid this. Now, if somebody can prove that he was actually involved in any criminality or organizing criminality, or even like he didn't go in the building, but he was part of the team and there was an understanding, like any of that, you will change my mind very quickly on this topic. But if it's
I
just
agree,
pure
and
speech,
I scoured online looking for that. Literally anybody and everybody who had a voice, Twitter accounts, everything. I could not find this guy connected to any illegal activity. Anything.
And don't you think if there was such proof, the government just would have charged that? It's so easy.
They probably would have. Yeah.
No, that was my point. That was my point about agitators and not having the right to retain your access to this country if you're not a citizen. That's the that's the ultimate question that I've been pressing on since I walked in.
You agree that's free speech within the standards set by the court, right? Like you said, agitating not in a direct,
not in a way that is criminally charged. I'll tell you right now. You were saying if he was criminally charged, in that case, you would be more supportive of the Trump administration. What I'm saying is, if I saw he was criminally charged based on everything that we know that he did, I'd be more in his camp. Because I don't think he can be criminally charged. I think that what he did is not a violation. But deporting someone is not criminal punishment.
That's true. That is.
Are there in your mind though? This is very very. Now I'm curious. Is there any standard that you think that the government has to meet in order to deport a legal immigrant or a visa holder? or can
So
they just do it
when I was
because?
when I was talking with Peace Corps, whatever, about this, I think he actually found it where there is like a very very low threshold standard as to like as long as the government could reach this level. Um, in that case, they certainly can be kept out of the country, and that's like basically we don't like Jews, we don't like Irish, we don't like whatever that would or Muslims, or something like that would be something that would be that's considered arbitrary and capricious, and I think that might be the standard. That if it's an arbitrary and capricious kind of yardstick by which they're removing
Ooh.
someone, yeah, in that case, that would be something that's a line too far. But that their threshold for controlling immigration and their powers there are very very broad, and unless they wantonly flout that and do something like saying we're removing all Chinese, we're removing all Muslims, we're removing all
Removing
Jews,
all
whatever,
pro-Palestine protesters?
or even all pro-Palestine protesters. I think that too. So someone who's participating in the crowd, I think is should be protected. I think
I think we got to
my
be
personal
careful though,
thing.
because there was a little conflation there that makes a big difference.
Okay, go.
There's a big difference between somebody who's not in the country and somebody who has status. Like, so if somebody's coming into the country, like we saw with Trump with the travel bans, he can ban a whole country. Like, there's all kinds of things the government can do to prevent people from coming in. But once you're in, you start acquiring more and more rights and status. So for somebody who's agreed to remove a green card holder who has due process rights, that's pretty different than removing somebody, than telling an immigrant you can't come in because you support a terrorist group, or you can't come in because you're from a country that has a terrorist problem and we think that bringing you in is a security risk. The government has, no question, enormous power to prevent entry. But once you let them in, you grant them the visa, you grant them the green card. They're a permanent residence, they have permanent status, they have rights they didn't have at the border. And I think that it's a mistake to conflate those two things. But yeah, I would agree with you. I think the government can ban somebody who's chanting "Death to America" at a rally, and
Why?
because you don't have a right to enter the country. Your rights are much circumscribed. I don't think that the same analysis applies to somebody who's living here with permanent status. They have free speech and due process rights. It's a very different analysis.
And I think that what the Supreme Court has told us is that means you cannot punish them criminally for doing it, but I don't know that has any effect on on INS getting rid of them.
I mean, I
I'm
think that
actually kind of confused on how like the security grounds A3 sort of work around that, like specifically with like the Death to America.
Yeah.
I think that if you have somebody who is chanting something that is about violent overthrow against the United States, that falls into clear non-protected speech.
That to
So
America is very vague, though. That's not saying they might say that they're
I think
praying
I
that
think I
it
think
gets
you could deport
cancer and
someone for that.
dies. What?
I think you could deport someone. I mean, again,
Why?
we're like you said, we're guessing, but
Right.
based on the case law that said that if you were
Because they're
a member of,
agitating. You're falling into the same thing that I've been saying since the moment I walked in here. That if
no,
that
because
they're agitating, in that case,
Death to
that's like
America
a whole
implies
different
you
thing
support
than
the
just
violent overthrow of the government, which is very different than I nebulously agitate in some kind of way. It's a much more pointed statement. You don't think "Death to America" is pretty different than like someone standing up and saying "Fight,
I think
fight,
it's
fight"
gross
or
and
"Get in their
revolting.
face"?
I think it's gross and revolting, and I think Irrelevant thinks that they should be allowed to. I think he disagrees with you on that. Tell me if I'm wrong, Irrelevant.
Wait, I disagree. What do you think I disagree with him on?
I think that if someone comes here in a green car and they're screaming "Death to America," should they be allowed to stay here?
Come here on a green card and they're screaming "Death to America."
They're
I
here.
would
They're in
need to
the.
see what they're doing in context. I don't think
Oh,
screaming "Death to America" in this Discord call or something in context of like a joke or something like that. I need to see other actions to indicate that this individual has motive to do something about it, and it's not just like a joke.
they're at a death.
Are we
They're at a
assuming
death.
like it's at a protest where
Right.
they're
They're at a
actively doing
protest,
like what
at
is
a
the
Death to
context?
America protest. That all, or that the
What does that mean?
what do you
Well,
mean, what does that
let's
mean?
make it specific.
Imagine
Let's
Colombia has a group that says that has some sort of group in there, which is the Death to America group. That's perfectly legal. They could have such a thing. So if they form something like that, and now he got up there and started chanting "Death to America," and he's not saying kill the president. He's not saying anything like that.
Important. I've seen people say "Death to America" ironically. So what does "Death to America" mean?
No one there is acting ironically. All of them are.
Okay, so give me the example. You're giving me a very pointed Death to America. Are they saying Death to America in its specific institutions that they believe are like racist, or like what are they? Or do we have reason to believe that they mean Death to America as in the American civilization needs to crumble? Then yeah, I would say that they shouldn't be.
Why? They shouldn't be allowed institutions still be an attack against the U.S. government. Like wouldn't the government
saying that your institutions are racist and they need to be changed and overhauled, and a context of that is saying death is total. Yeah, no.
So why not say death to racism? Why say death to America?
Hold on, institutions is an incredibly like normal, understandable approach for a lot of people. Like, the idea that you would use the word death there, that's a completely like rational thing that people. It's something that I would argue that like more antsy like young people do, but it's something people do.
Okay, so if American citizens were screaming, but made a group which was called Death to America, and it's why it is that we're praying that America collapses into the sea and everyone here dies. So and then that's the name of their group. Okay, that's what they want. And now I'll ask you this: do you think any of them could be thrown in jail for that?
I'm sorry, what?
Can they be thrown in jail?
Any American?
No, any American who did that should be thrown in jail for that.
For just hoping that America falls into
the sea. And
having
rallies and rallies, we need to have America fall into the sea.
They got a flag.
They can't do anything about it. You can't control that.
I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you that there's no way that they should possibly be thrown in jail. There should be no criminal punishment, nothing. That's part of our free speech rights. I 100% agree with you on that. Let's say let's say now imagine someone now comes up and becomes the leader of that group, and he's visiting from another country and he's screaming "Death to America." Do you think that we should have to keep him here?
I think this is a bad example. We would look at a different example because you can't make America fall into the sea.
Oh,
the example you would be looking for, I would hope, would be like a Death to America group where somebody is arguing that like Hamas comes domestically to eradicate the American way of life and then takes over the country. And if somebody like that were to come in on a green card, yeah, get him the fuck out. Yeah.
Why? Well, why should we be able to get him out?
Because he's advocating for a terrorist group to come into America, going to protest, advocating for a terrorist group to come into America, eradicate the American government, so that way they can hold the land. What do you mean? Get him the fuck out.
It's not illegal for him to say it. It's perfectly legal for him to say all that.
I agree with the idea that a green card holder should not have the same speech as a naturalized citizen. Is that what this argument is about?
We're done now. We're good. Then we're good. Then
you just disagreed with that. My disagreement was about whether or not this specific guy's speech met that merit. Okay, that's what this whole argument has been about.
So fine. Maybe that's why you and I have been like, in two different times.
I'm sorry, Wick. What is the name? Is this panel not about?
It is about Mahmoud Khalil.
I understand it's about Mahmoud
but it's also about. But it's hold on.
Did we not name a specific person?
But it's about. But it's also about the concepts on which Mahmoud Khalil, right? Why the general concept of to what extent should First Amendment protections be given to people who are legal permanent residents, visa holders, etc. So we're using this specific case to explore a large topic. That's what we're
doing. Moral arguments was brought up in the beginning of the whole stream. That's kind of like where we're leading into now is the whole moral argument.
Right.
And that's why look, the procedure matters on the legal side, but on the moral side, the reason the procedural stuff still matters is on some level the question is, when does the government have the power to negatively interact with you? And we can discuss that as a moral question or a legal question. And for me, if we're doing it like a big concepts moral level, I would say it is important that when the government never negatively interacts with you, they do it above board, they do it publicly, they do it with scrutiny, they do it by the book so that the appropriateness of their actions can be fairly evaluated. Like I said at the beginning of this, it seems likely to me that many of the people the Trump administration would like to deport lied on their immigration forms. So try to deport them for that. Like, it makes a difference. It makes a difference how
I
you
agree with
do
you
it.
100%.
If you give
I agree
them
with you 100% on this.
unchecked power to, under the cover of night, deport people with no public accountability, that's a very scary power to give your government. And it's not one that I would support in this way, even if it becomes supportable on, hypothetical different facts that we can talk about.
Yeah,
I'll tell
because
you right now.
it's. Oh, go
Yeah.
ahead, please.
No, I came here to discuss ideas, not people. You want to talk about people, you want to talk to me about specifically Mahmoud Khalil and this deportation, this situation. I'll tell you right now, I don't know enough about it. I don't understand how any of us would know anything about it. You think you know enough about it to weigh in and say that it's definitely wrong? I'll tell you, I don't know. I won't know until I see more facts unfold. If you want to talk about a person specifically, that's not my type. That's not my type of deal. My type of deal is talking about ideas. I don't like talking about people. I like talking about ideas. That's what I'm talking about conceptually. Is this something that is legal? Is it something that's philosophically proper? Is this moral? That's what I'll talk about. So that's why when you want to keep coming back to this specific thing, and I haven't seen this guy say this thing, I'm like, I don't know. Are you his boyfriend that you know everything he said? I don't know everything he said. I wasn't trying to be. I wasn't trying to be sarcastic.
Because you keep saying, like, I haven't seen the evidence. To Ryan's point, the idea that morally the administration can kick somebody out, and we have no earthly idea what basis this person has to be kicked out. And when I try to, in all good faith and fairness, scour. I'm not even scouring liberal sources. I'm scouring conservative sources for a justification to kick this guy out. I find nothing that meets merit. Nothing that meets merit to kick this guy out on the moral grounds. So, to Ryan's point, why are you okay if you yourself agree that you haven't seen any evidence or whatever, like, and you may be skeptical as to the evidence that the administration has? Why are you okay with the administration doing this and pushing it without a trial? Why are you okay with them deporting this person without a trial?
That's how we've been doing it for 250 years.
That's not an argument. What I asked
really?
you is, why are you okay with it? Yes,
Really?
that's not an argument.
No,
Why are you okay with it right now?
Ryan's argument is about procedure.
No, let Lawgic go. Let Lawgic and Irrelevant go.
What I'm saying is,
please.
you all of a sudden now you're waking up and saying, why are we allowed to deport people why are they allowed to deport people? Why are they allowed to deport people? That's the way this
morally
country...
justify why the government does what it does.
Oh, so you don't want me to talk about Mahmoud Khalil? You want me to talk about the ideal of morally justifying
you refuse to talk about Mahmoud Khalil.
I'm saying is,
talk about the procedure that you're so willingly able to just let move forward. Why are you okay with the idea that the administration is able to provide no evidence and kick this person out? And by all respect and purpose, you may not agree with my interpretation of the facts, but you haven't even looked up the evidence to any significant degree, or at least the ones that you've indicated in this conversation,
right,
to a significant degree, for whether or not it's legitimate to kick this guy out.
I'll tell you why. Morally, I explained to you at the outset morally where I stand with respect to the rights that someone who's visiting this country have compared to American citizens. So from a perspective of a moral perspective, I think it's actually immoral. I think what Supreme Court decided in granting them civil rights was a thoroughly immoral decision by the Supreme Court, because it's hamstring our government from doing what the very purpose of our government is, which is to protect the American citizenry. So morally, I have no qualms with the administration having the power to remove someone, because I don't think they should be having any civil liberties, much less the right to they have a right to stay here. That's morally. As far as legally, what I'll tell you is, from a legal perspective, that's the way the law has been operating here for 250 years. Does that sufficiently answer your question?
That's an answer, at least. We morally disagree on whether or not the administration should have the right to, without evidence, deport somebody.
Not this administration, any administration.
I would agree. That is the principal disagreement. I think if you are deporting somebody who's on a green card, you should have some measure of evidence that is publicly scrutinizable and things like that generated, so as to avoid tyrannical and authoritarian.
I want to make sure I understand your position, so I know what you're saying.
Okay.
Are you saying that, hypothetically, this is divorcing it from the real world for a second, if the government never introduces any more evidence supporting their deportation of Khalil, and currently the amount of evidence is zero, just to be totally clear, I've read the docket. So right now there is no evidence. If they never provide any evidence, deportation is still fine in your mind?
He's going to stay. I was saying,
he's asking morally. He's asking you
Morally.
morally. Is
Like
it
that.
more? Are you
Like,
morally
can the
okay
government
with
deport
that?
someone on the basis of nothing, no showing?
I would
Just
hope
do
that morally I would hope that they have some sort of reason for removing someone, because there is that minimum threshold. Meaning I don't want him being removed because he's a Muslim. I don't want him being removed because of some basic genetic composition that he has. I think is as long as they survive that basic bare threshold scrutiny level, then yeah, if they want to remove someone who's visiting here,
The only
I'm
basis
fine
we
with
have
that.
right now is Rubio said so.
Yeah, no, I
Is that
understand that,
sufficient for you?
and that to me that if that's all they've got in this case, I would expect that the court will let him stay until the government they can
Well,
go
the
jump on
problem
a
is
lake.
he had to petition
Would
to
it
get
be
a
okay for
trial.
you to deport him? Like morally, would it be okay to deport him on
You're
just
asking,
Rubio said so, nothing else?
you're asking me my position, and you're saying if they have nothing else, and that maybe this guy had nothing to do with anything, that would bother me.
Okay. Yeah.
That would
So I
bother
mean,
me.
I appreciate that, because I think that's an
How
honest response. We'll see what they come up with. It's right. Like I've been stunned by how little time
Like
they
maybe
put
he had
into
nothing to do
proving
with
this.
any of these riots, never had anything to do with anything that happened there. So in that case, you're telling me morally, like, well, would that bother me? Yeah, I'd be concerned that maybe he's being removed because he's a Muslim. I'd be bothered by that.
how are we supposed to figure out the merits of any evidence for him being kicked out if he didn't petition for a trial?
I don't know. I mean, but I'll ask you this: how did that work? How did that work 50 years ago?
What, this specific law? I don't know. I don't know how this specific. Based on my limited searches and stuff, I couldn't really find this law deployed in very many other cases.
How many people did Barack Obama remove?
You're talking about deport?
He got rid of them. Yeah, deported them.
I
Supposedly,
don't know how many
I was
people Barack Obama
I
deported,
remember
but
hearing how he was the
remember a few
deporter in
deals.
chief before Trump came along. He's the
Yeah,
deporter in
he
chief before
deported.
Trump came along. How many of them had evidence laid out as to why it is that they're being removed?
I don't know. I didn't look
Oh,
into those individual
well,
cases.
maybe we should, because you seem to think it's unique to this
This what
administration.
about I'm sure we can find.
No, I'm
specific
saying this is
cases
the way
from
it's been in
Democratic
America forever.
administrations of them
Logic.
inappropriately using deportations. We're talking specifically about the one that we came here, which is the title of the panel that we're on.
All right, so you
Well,
win.
no,
But I'm
hold
not
on.
Khalil. There's no
Logic.
evidence. I don't know about him.
Obama was the deporter in chief. Obama set records for deportation of illegal aliens. Mr. Khalil is a legal permanent resident.
And that is an important
That's
distinction.
not a small distinction.
That's a very
deal, man.
that's a
Like,
massive
that's-
agreed. That is a massive distinction. You think he didn't deport anyone here who had a green card? He didn't deport anyone who had.
What is this? Who cares? Why are we shadow boxing with a guy who hasn't been in office for a decade?
I'm saying it was like this under Obama. It was like this under Bush. It was like this under Clinton. It was like this under Bush. It was like this.
I'm not going to make an argument. Reagan. It's been this way, so therefore it ought to be. I'm making a moral claim here.
Okay, so you're making what moral claim? You're making
a moral claim that a president shouldn't be allowed to deport.
Why?
Why shouldn't a president be allowed to deport somebody without evidence?
Yeah, why? Why?
Yeah, because I believe that you should have evidence to be able to remove somebody from the United States of America who is legally here.
Why?
It'd be great if Democrats
What?
focused
Did you
on
just ask
immigration
why?
reform.
I believe is that a real? Okay.
Answer the question.
Answer the question.
I think that we are entitled to
Hold on,
no,
stop.
If we are legally
Irrelevant.
inside of
Go.
the United States.
Repeat that, because I couldn't hear you. Everyone was trying to talk over you. Irrelevant. Answer this question again. I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry. Please, for the show.
If you are legally within the United States, you should be required to provide evidence for why you are removing that legal status and deporting somebody from the United States. And Donald Trump, his administration, didn't want to provide any measure of evidence for the deportation of this individual. He had to petition for his right to be able to have that evidence provided.
You think that should be illegal?
Yeah, that should not. Yeah, you should not be able to rescind the legal status of legal citizen, or sorry, I shouldn't say citizen, legal residents of the United States of America.
Right, you should run for office.
And thankfully, it is illegal, as well as should be illegal.
I mean, I'll tell you this: you're making this point here with respect to this. I'm trying to think through here with respect to on the global element, as far as the right of a president to remove someone and what scrutiny that should necessitate. That's essentially what we're getting at here. Should that necessitate some level of scrutiny? I'll concede this. The more as I'm sort of fleshing this through in my brain. I didn't come in here married to like this is what this is on every potential issue that raises up here. The more I think about it, the more I think that does make sense, to be fair. And the reason I think that makes sense is because we don't want to have someone being removed on the basis of some sort of genetic DNA element to them or some basis of their race, religion, or creed. So I think that does make sense as far as saying that with respect to deportations of someone who's a legal resident. I think that does make sense. Yeah, I can appreciate that there is a difference between them and a legal alien. I think that's Ryan made a very important distinction there, and I think that the concept of saying there should be such a thing, I don't know if there is such a thing, but the concept that there should be such a thing, I could see a moral argument for that.
And Logic, I think this is an important point that you just got onto, right? Because like, imagine he didn't have permanent. Imagine it was what the government thought it was. Because when they arrested him, they thought he was on a student visa, not that he had a green card, right?
Right. That's what I saw.
Green card means you have vested rights. Student visa is a privilege. If the government wants to revoke your student visa, I mean, I haven't looked into that legally because it's not the case here, but like, it strikes me morally that they should be able to do that for damn near any reason they want to. Like that's, it's a privilege, not a right. Whereas once you have a green card, you have a vested right in the country.
So on morally, hold on,
is different.
Ryan. So morally, you would be okay if someone here was here on a student visa and they attended a protest for, they attended an anti-Trump protest for whatever reason, right? You would be okay with the government morally being able to revoke their student visas and just send them out of the country?
No, I wouldn't think that was like a good action, and I'd say it's a bad action. But in terms of what I think we're talking about is morally, should the government have this power in the abstract? Like, should the government in the abstract have the power to say, we get to decide who gets student visas? It's not a right of yours. It's a privilege that you get to come here and study.
Should not get, but hold on to, like, keep their student visas, right?
I think it's a really low. It would be a really low bar for me.
Really? Okay.
I think that you like. I'm not saying there'd be no limits, but the bar would be very low for that as compared to a green card holder. I think that's a world of difference. I don't think a foreign national has a right to a student visa. That strikes me as a privilege.
I'm sorry. So you finished. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I do think, though, that once you've earned lawful permanent resident status, that's very different. You've been here, you've been in the country, they've been vetting you, you've been applying, you earned your rights, and they're different rights. And it's a spectrum. You, like I said at the beginning of the show, alien in another country, minimal rights. Student visa, a little bit more. And as you get more vested into the country, you accrue more and more rights. So when you push someone to the left of the side of the spectrum where they're not really vested in America, they have less rights. That would make sense to me in the abstract.
That's a logical take. So now that I'm conceding that I think that morally it makes sense to have some sort of check to ensure that we're not removing people on the basis of their race, religion, or creed, and that there's some sort of basis behind it. Are you willing to concede to me that if someone is here on a visa, not a green card, someone's here on a visa and they're an agitator, that should be a basis for our president to have them removed? Well, agitator, as I've used the term.
I'm assuming that you're referring to me because I've had the most back and forth.
I'm talking to all three of you, actually.
Okay, sure. So
I do want to give LT a chance to get in here after you're done, though. Irrelevant, right? Because she's been trying. So
I got you.
I'm sorry.
Just quickly, let me go over what I believe, or can you just go
agitator
over
is someone who's inspiring, whose speech is designed to inspire people towards conduct in the future.
Sorry, I'm assuming you meant illegal conduct, or just conduct.
Yeah, no, illegal.
Yeah, no. If you're on a visa and you're trying to get people to do illegal shit, get the fuck out.
Not then and there, not by the Brandenburg standard, but that like basically that they should make it their life mission to let's say blow up buildings.
Jesus, wait, I'm sorry. If you're trying to incite people to make it their life mission,
not incite,
to blow up buildings,
legal term.
in the United States of America,
right. I don't want to catch. I'm not trying to be a douchebag lawyer when I say this, but I avoided the word incitement because incitement is illegal even for an American citizen. But I'm saying they're not going all the way to the level incitement as defined by Brandenburg, but they're actually agitated. That's why I use this term agitator, because it's not quite illegal incitement, but it does lead towards there being some sort of violent repercussions or illegal activity. So that's why I'm saying, would you agree with me that someone who's here merely on a visa, that they should be removable if it's shown that they're an agitator?
How close would you how close would like agitator and someone who's doing a call of action be to you? Just
Are
so
you
I can
saying
kind of
agitated to incitement? Is that what you're asking?
like a call like is an agitator somebody who's calling people to action, or like I'm wondering, like, do you see those two as two different things,
That's
or
a very good. I think that's a very good question, and I think that the way I'm using the term, it's sufficient. It's broad enough that people can actually draw their own conclusions as to, like, how, at what point does someone cross from sharing ideas to becoming an agitator? I think that's a reasonable question to be had. But what I'm saying is, at a level that people would recognize them, that the finder of fact would recognize them to be agitating. So my standard might be different from yours. I recognize that. You know what I'm saying? So,
Can
at
I
what
give a
point am
high
I
goal,
trying to
maybe?
push people towards action? And that's a question of fact, which no two people may agree on that. I can recognize that, because whenever you're dealing with speech, you're going to have that issue as no two people agreeing on it. But I'm just asking, if I can, now that I conceded that there should be some sort of overview to when you're removing someone who's here lawfully, to me that makes sense, purely to get past that very low threshold of that you're not being racist, you're not being bigoted against that person. And once they can establish that there's some basis beyond bigotry which is leading toward it, in that case I'd be like, yeah, okay, then they can go. Then
In
we're
what
going to give it to them.
context do they have to justify that? Just
I'm saying
say it?
you're saying so then now we're getting into the nitty-gritty, which we're kind of writing our own code here, right? So now we're starting to get into the
I don't
nitty-gritty
think we
as
are.
to,
We're
like,
just asking, is the administration just saying we have a reason, this is our reason, without providing any evidence for how reasonable it is that is even true to be able to do it? Because let's say I wanted to deport all MAGA people and I just said, well, they're just weird. That's my reason. It's not because they're MAGA, they're just weird. So I want to get rid of them.
yeah,
Would you be okay with that? Because I'm giving a reason that isn't,
you're
or
saying
sorry, I
someone who's
shouldn't
not a
use
citizen.
weird.
You're saying,
They are agitators.
yeah, I was going to say
So
weird is
Sure,
a
sure. Yeah, not
brutal
weird.
one to
Agitators.
use.
They are agitators, so I'm
Yep,
getting rid
that
of
didn't work
MAGA.
that
And I
didn't work well
target
last time.
exclusively MAGA people. Would you be okay with that, or should I have to provide evidence?
So now we're getting into a political group versus a bigotry type of thing, right? That's what
Well,
you're
I
asking
mean,
me.
you can make an argument that the political groups protest certain amounts of bigotry. You can make an argument if you wanted to.
And if we're
That's
talking
the
about the
argument.
political groups, it makes a difference that they're a designated terrorist organization. Like, you might agree or disagree with MAGA, right? But
Sure,
like
that's true.
a student coming in and saying, I love the Democrats or I love MAGA is very different than them coming in and being like, I love the cartel. Let's
Yeah, I agree
like,
with
I,
that.
all
Yeah,
I
I don't
really
disagree
support
with
is the
that.
cartel, and they're hanging out at the border saying, like, who's awesome? The cartel. And yeah, there's some cartel guys in the bar. I'm not affiliated with them. They might have a sign-up sheet, but I'm not really affiliated with them. But the cartel is great.
Yeah,
I feel
maybe
like
I miscommunicated what I was saying here. What I'm saying is, let's say I'm a Democrat and I want to deport or remove all of these people who are coming in who are pro MAGA or like trying to support MAGA.
Mhm.
And I say they're agitators, but I only target the people who are pro MAGA.
Hmm.
Would you say that that's okay? Because I gave a reason that is fine. I just don't have to prove it. I just said it.
that's a
Would you say
to
fantastic
that's
kind
okay?
of touch on one of the moral questions Wick brought up earlier, in reference to like the Oxford thing, if the MAGA people under your scenario did something similar to Oxford, what they did to Columbia, I would all be for the removal.
Wait, no. I'm
Because
asking the removal on the basis that me just saying that they're an agitator and not providing any evidence.
Oh, I'm
I'm just
it's-
asking,
No, I think
are
it's a good-
people
I think it's a
entitled
good-
to
I'm,
some
I'm
kind of due process for their removal? That's all I'm asking. Or
no,
can I just simply say I have a reason and you just have to pinky promise? You have to trust me, pinky promise.
I think that's a really interesting question.
It would depend a lot, in my mind, on that spectrum I was laying out before about how vested their rights are in the country. Like, you know what I mean? Like if you're in
Yeah, I
your
agree.
country and you're applying for a student visa and and the government says no because they don't like your
okay.
political orientation.
Just to help you guys out here, let's keep it in the realm of they already have a visa, they're already in the country.
Okay.
Yep.
So I think we're starting to get into an area now because we're both. You got me to come along with you that morally it makes sense that there should be some sort of of ensuring that this is not some sort of bigotry or something of that nature. I mean, I guess in theory you could have the same way we have with crimes that are being charged. We have some sort of due process steps of reasonable suspicion and probable cause, which has to be supported by an affidavit, which helps establish what leads you to these conclusions. I mean, I guess if we were redrafting what the law is here, which is not the law now, but if we were redrafting what the law is, what makes sense to me morally is that if you had some sort of magistrate judge who was signing off that this type of conduct is sufficiently agitational, that in that case I would say that kind of makes sense.
Sorry, what I'm specifically asking is it okay for Donald Trump and his administration to just say this guy is an agitator, get him out,
Or a gang member, or whatever.
yeah, or a gang member, and there is no process to prove that it is true. He can just do it, say it, and then they're out. If they are a green card holder,
I think
And to tee it up, your conversation with Pisco, how would that not be arbitrary and capricious if they don't have to prove anything?
I think he's asking you irrelevant.
me? No, I don't. Are you asking me, Ryan?
No, I was asking Lawgic because I think
Oh,
Lawgic
I
and I are on the
misunderstood.
same on the same page here. That it's a lower threshold if you're
Right.
like on the student visa, but there's still a threshold. Like
Right.
you
So-
if it's truly arbitrary or it's truly for no reason, then that the government shouldn't do that, and you would need some amount of process to prove that it wasn't arbitrary or racist or something along those lines. Which, if you have no process, then there's no protection. So there would be less process than for a green card holder, but it couldn't be zero process. It would have to be just less.
So I think that we're sort of coming back to where I started when I was explaining to you all how this is what the law is versus what I think philosophically the law
Yep.
should be. So similarly, I think that we're having a conversation amongst ourselves as people who are reasonably intelligent, trying to figure out what is morality and what would morality say should be the case. And you can get me to agree with you that morally, there should be some sort of level to make sure that a removal is not arbitrary and capricious. But that's different from saying what the law is. And the law currently doesn't have any system in place that stops a president from removing someone that in theory could be arbitrary and capricious. That's just so we're talking about as far as Trump complying with the law. In that case, the law says that that's what he's allowed to do. So
But wouldn't that mean that the trial would get shot down because he doesn't need a trial to be able to do it? The executive can unilaterally do it.
It could happen.
I don't think that. I think you're talking about illegal aliens again, because that's the Obama example where it's like you don't.
No, I'm not talking about illegal aliens.
No, we're not talking about illegal aliens.
I'm not talking about illegal aliens. I'm saying,
you're saying.
I'm saying, what is the what process? I'm asking you this: what is the process that's necessary in order to remove someone who's a green card holder? I told you I'm not an immigration lawyer, so you tell me what's the process.
That's what we've been talking about the whole show.
Well, we've been talking about what should be the process versus what is the process.
Khalil's a green card holder.
Right.
There's a statute that lays out the grounds for deportation. They include things like crimes of moral turpitude, violent crimes, immigration fraud, and as pertinent here, the Secretary of State saying that your presence is contrary to foreign policy goals, though he didn't do the paperwork. There's a whole list of things that allow you to deport A green card.
Those are
Okay, to
bases.
answer,
Those are bases,
sure,
not
I'll answer
procedural.
your question because I have the site up. I took it up. This is from the uscis.gov under the green card section. And here are the rights for a green card holder as a permanent resident. They have, and I'm just going to list them. There's 3. I'm going to blow through them real quick. To live permanently in the United States, provided you do not commit any actions that would make you removable under immigration law. Work in the United States any legal work of your qualifications and choosing. Please note that some jobs will be limited to U.S. citizens for security reasons. And then third, which I think is a relevant portion, be protected by all laws of the United States, your state of residence, and local jurisdictions, which to me implies that they have the protection of the laws, including the right to a fair trial, right? The right to be heard and have a hearing. And this is, again, specifically for permanent resident green card holders.
Awesome.
I can link you in the group chat, what I'm reading.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
That's what Khalil's lawyers have alleged, is that the habeas petition says that there's a speech violation, there's a statutory violation because they didn't follow the procedure, and there's a due process violation. And we can get into the nitty gritty that yes, due process is a lesser right for in the immigration context than it is in other contexts, but there's still some process accorded. And unfortunately, the executive here honestly, they're just stepping on race. If I'm charitable, they just did this in the dumbest way possible.
Okay.
If I'm feeling less charitable, they did it in a way that would try to set a precedent that they could do something truly wild.
Sure. While we read that and go over that, I'm going to go through some super chats real quick because we are coming on to the end of the show, and I want to make sure everyone has a chance to have closing statements and things like that. But I also want to make some money, so I'm going to go through these real quick if I can.
Get that bag, Wick.
Indeed. $2 from Promises Made, kept to say immigrants follow visa restrictions. Read them. Thank you for the $2. $14 from Kay to have a little smiley face. Thank you for the smiley face. Joe the Mick, membership for 6 months. Thank you for the membership. It's simple. Do not engage in terrorism on a visa. Well, thank you for that. $5 from Zach. Good logic would have been Kerbals enthusiastically. Okay. A.K. Batozai has gifted me 10 WIC memberships, which we appreciate. And then $5 from Deej Nuts to say, what are the practical reasons for a green card? Why have this in-between step of citizenship if we're granting the right to be in the USA? And then finally, $10 from Alexander Rin. The very fundamental problem with regards to visas can be revoked at a whim is within the phrasing. Should visa holders not be taken to immigration court to denote the reason for revoking it? And there we go. And now that we've all had a chance to look at the links I provided in the group chat, also in the YouTube and in the Twitch chat, let's get in on this, right?
I think that comment was funny because I used to have in my bio on X, I'm not evil enough to be a Democrat.
No.
So I thought that was
okay.
funny.
Fair enough. But yeah, as to the question at hand, right? Like permanent. And legally, it's at least it seems to me. I'm not a lawyer, right? I've never gone to the Supreme Court or anything, but it seems to me that under this, again, the guidance that I've seen from the official sources, that permanent residents do have a right to a trial and fair process. Is that incorrect? Am I reading this wrong?
No, I think they are entitled to it because the Supreme Court says that they have civil rights.
But
So, yeah.
your argument is, and again, correct me if I'm wrong.
My argument, when I came in here
Sure.
is my argument is we're having. You want to have a philosophical conversation with me? I'm willing to have a philosophical conversation. You want to have a conversation about Mahmoud Khalil? I'll tell you right now that to me, I don't think any of us know enough about what the government's case was. You want to tell me that they had no legal right to try deporting someone with a green card? That could be. In which case, he definitely should not have been deported. I don't. People think I have.
Do you
like
disagree
some
that they
sort of.
attempted to do it without due process?
I'm sorry. What did you say?
Do you disagree that they attempted to do it without due process?
From what I've seen, that does seem to be the case.
Okay. Would you agree that that is a massive overstep? I don't have to load it with massive. That is an overstep from the Trump administration?
If that's what happened, yeah, that is an overstep.
Did you not just agree that that's what happened?
I'm saying I don't know that's what happened. I'm inclined to agree. I'm inclined to agree that if in
But
fact that
I
if in
think this
fact what
is,
the public believes to have happened is what happened, then yeah, I think that's an overstep.
and I
I
think
don't.
this is
You,
really
you guys,
important
you all
because
seem to think I have some sort of marriage to oh, because Trump did it, therefore it's okay. And that's never been my position about any individual ever. Not about Donald Trump, not about any human. That whatever they do, all of a sudden gets conferred with some sort of blessing that this is okay. So yeah, it's possible that there was an overstep. I would assume they thought they had some sort of legal basis to do what they did. And the question is whether or not the court ends up agreeing that they did have a legal basis for it. But talking about that's why to me the specifics about Khalil Mahmoud I don't even know which is his first or his last name. I'm not trying to be rude. The Khalil story to me is relatively it's that's something that gets sorted out. But that's as opposed to which and should be sorted out. That's the way America should be functioning because we do have due process.
Yeah. So as far as my questioning goes, is that there was just two questions. If
Okay.
you believe that there was no due process or the Trump administration tried to do this without due process,
Mm.
then and that you believe that due
And without the
process
backing of another basis, legal backing to avoid due process, because is
Sure.
likely what
Yeah,
they did.
without another basis, yeah, to avoid due process as well, right?
Mhm.
Then, and you also believe that this person would be entitled to due process, then you would agree that the Trump administration did
Overstepped.
something
Overstepped.
what?
I
Yeah.
think that they overstepped. I would say that they overstepped.
Okay.
You see, I don't problem saying that because it's possible that happened. So
this is
and
You
this
keep
is
saying
really
it's
important.
possible that
what I'm
happened.
saying is, but
did.
that thing I threw in there is kind of important, that there could be a basis that in this particular circumstance that they don't have to follow the typical due process that we expect you and I would enjoy as being American citizens.
I would
Okay.
Okay,
also probably
wouldn't
just
they?
I do
add,
want to. I
have
do
to
want to give
have
it
that
to.
be?
I do want to give it to
Okay, yeah.
LT. She's been trying, and then we're gonna go to.
Yeah, I'm
then we're
sorry.
Gonna,
no worries.
that's fine.
I probably am just going to say, like, I think we all kind of would agree that Mr. Khalil does deserve due process rights. Is that something we can all agree on? Yeah.
As a general rule, yes.
Sure, yeah. Okay. Fantastic. I was just trying to. Oh my god, I'm just trying to think of what you're saying. As far as like
Legally, not morally.
beyond that, like, let's go beyond his due process rights now. Should he still be deported? I think is ultimately the question that we all really
Are
should get
grappling
to.
with.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's two questions off of that. Should he be deported? I don't think he should be. I don't think I haven't seen sufficient evidence from any source that would meet the merit of me feeling like he should be deported. He ought to be deported, especially the context of his life. But also, secondly, another thing that comes off of that is that the Trump administration just tried to do something unilaterally without the due process of law. That's a little teensy bit there that he just tried to
You
do
just tried
that.
to what? I'm sorry. What was that? I
He
missed that.
tried to remove somebody from the United States without the due process of law.
I
This is an important point though, like, because look, I mean, I often come on this show to argue points that get me labeled conservative. Like I think the first thing I did publicly on the internet was defend the immunity decision. Like this is like I'm not typically up here yelling and screaming that the Trump administration did something wrong. But when the Trump administration does something wrong, we need to be able to admit that because that's the only way to reign in excess. And this
absolutely.
this doesn't seem like a hard case to me. This one
100%.
seems easy.
But
Like this, if they have, it is not up to me to imagine the evidence or the process the Trump administration might have or might give. It is their obligation to show that evidence, and until they do, they're wrong.
Okay, gang. I don't want to keep anyone. I don't want to hold anyone hostage and lock them in the gym or I'm not Hamas. Okay, I'm not going to hold you hostage here. So I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank everyone for being here and give you closing statements. I have links to all their stuff in my description, YouTube description. You can find it out. But I'm going to give them a chance to have closing arguments, closing statements, tell people who you are, where they can find you, etc. And if you've enjoyed the show, hit that like button, hit that subscribe. We got some great content coming up this week and a really big announcement soon about maybe a trip I will be taking and a show I will be going on. But we'll talk about that later. Let's start with Libertarian Trap, and then we'll end with Good Logic, and that's the order we're going to go in. Libertarian Trap, give us
All
your closing thoughts.
Let's see. As far as the deportation of Mr. Khalil, I'm still pretty much in support of it. He was the leader of this group that went on to do some violent things, whether or not that he was directly responsible. I think as the leader of the organization, he still bears some responsibility for the events that occurred on Columbia. As far as the letter to the law, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, you could argue some security grounds and things that were found. NYPD made claims of weapons. I tried to look, I couldn't really find too much. But at the end of the day, I honestly think he needs to go. I think, as Mr. Good Logic here has put it, he is a bit of an agitator, and he has made calls to action.
Where can people find you?
Oh, you can find me on Twitter at Libertarian Trap.
Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. Ryan
Thank you.
Malali. I'm sorry. I really
Ryan
bad
Malali.
with names,
It's
but go ahead.
It's totally unpronounceable. Has 4 L's. It's a nightmare. And a brand risk. So, it is what it is. Principles before party every single time. And I'm an independent, so that's easy for me to say. But it is incumbent upon us to defend our rights and the constitutional order. And if we don't, it won't last. I often get online to argue with leftists about their hysteria about things that they claim that Trump is doing that I don't think rise to that level. And I often defend positions that get me labeled a conservative. But in this instance, the Trump administration has gone way too far. It is not up to us to imagine the evidence they might have. It is not up to us to imagine the process they could have afforded Mr. Khalil. It is their obligation to present that evidence so that people can evaluate it. The burden is on them. We don't have to imagine it. It's not a connect the dot exercise. So until and unless the Trump administration actually follows the law and actually complies with the Fifth and First Amendments, this is a wrongful action. And people, regardless of party, should call it out, because you don't have to disavow Trump to say this was a bad thing. He shouldn't have done it. And I hope that that happens, because he has evidence that he's actually a politically sensitive kind of guy. And if his base starts saying, no, this is too far, it might change his actions, which would be good. And hopefully that will allow him to do the parts of his agenda that maybe you agree with or maybe you don't lawfully in the future. This is a bridge too far.
Okay, thank you for being here. If you want to find his stuff, I've linked his Twitter in my YouTube description. You can check on that. Irrelevant, go ahead.
All right. So my position is I've seen no evidence that meets the merit of him being deported, or he ought be deported, or anything like that. As we discussed, the due process thing, I think, is really important, that the Trump admin tried to push this forward, and then the person had to have his lawyers petition for a right to be able to get a trial. I think that's really important. And so, yeah, that's been my position on it. I'm totally open to people providing me information showing that this guy is a agitator or anything like that. Some of the sources that I found shows that his peers hailed him as explicitly a de-escalator. He would actively de-escalate. He wasn't participating in the encampments that were seen as violent and stuff like this. This was not where his participation lied. His principal leadership was a negotiator, de-escalating based on everything that I saw. Last little thing, just a little tidbit here. Ryan, I respect the fuck out of some of the points that you're making. I would love to hear your opinion on the Mayor Eric Adams stuff with the Trump admin as well. I'd love to hear about that if you have an opinion on that at some point in time. But other than that, I'm irrelevant. Thank you.
Check him out, gang. A link to his Kick chat is on Kick channel is again in YouTube's description. Really appreciate you. Last but certainly not least, Good Logic, sir.
Yeah, I think I made my position pretty clear throughout here. I will point out that many terrorists people having terrorist associations, they've been removed. They didn't go through the whole due process thing. They didn't have the whole proof. We didn't have to present evidence. They just were removed for having terrorist affiliation. And so now you want to say that this is a step further, where this guy was engaging in potential agitation. I don't know, Mr. Irrelevant. Is it Mr.? I'm not trying to. Yeah, he seems to think that it's that Mahmoud Khalil was this holy man who was fixing all the fights and putting out fires, and I don't know enough about him to tell you one way or the other. But I do think that this ultimately is an immigration issue. It's being conflated as being a speech issue. If you want to find me, I'm on YouTube at Good Logic. I'm on Rumble at Good Logic, and on X, I'm known as The Following Pro, as in the following program, but without the gram with no grams. So thank you so much. I had a great time engaging with each and every one of you. It was my debut here, and it was a lot of fun.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. We'll have other topics, and I'll reach out if I think you're appropriate for them. I really appreciate all of you. Okay, right now, we're going to leave. We're going to let everyone go. We're going to raid in Prime Kai, so tell him this is a hate raid, and we do hate him. So, wait, bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Okay. And
Ryan, could I steal you for your opinion